Today on Rock the Park, we're following a different kind of park trail.
Everywhere you look in Washington, D.C., there's something cool and something unique.
It's a trail through the growth of American liberty. These national parks and monuments in our nation's capital tell stories, both heroic.
It says, out of the mountain of despair, a stone of hope.
And tragic.
So this is it.
That's exactly where President Lincoln was seated that night.
It gives you chills to see it just so close.
And we're going behind the scenes.
This is the stairwell to the Washington Monument.
To explore some stories most Americans never get a chance to see.
This is incredible.
And it all starts right now.
I'm Jack Stewart.
And I'm Colton Smith. We've been buddies for years, and we love exploring the national parks.
It's all about packing up a car and just doing it. Just hitting the road.
Our goal is to visit every national park in this country.
And when you go off the beaten path like we do,
there's no telling what will happen next.
Get set to rock the park.
Today, we're visiting not one, but dozens of national parks concentrated in one place. It's our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., one of the most inspiring places in the world.
We're honoring not only our nation's past, but also a woman who's meant so much to the national parks.
We are here on a very special trip. We're going to be meeting up with Secretary of the Interior, Sally Jewell, once again.
Yeah, so incredibly excited. We've gotten to hang out with Sally Jewell once before, and when she gave us the call and said, hey, you want to come down to Washington? Pretty easy answer for us.
We first met Secretary Jewell at Mount Rainier National Park in her home state of Washington. As Secretary of the Interior under President Barack Obama, her job included overseeing all of our national parks.
This time, she's offered to guide us to the top of the Washington Monument, with a behind-the-scenes look at parts the public never sees.
We're not climbing a mountain, but we're going to be climbing the stairs, and there's a lot of stairs.
I mean, basically what she did is she found the tallest building in Washington, D.C. and said, let's climb that. It's perfect.
But first, we're exploring some of the most famous parkland in America without leaving the city limits.
We're normally not in places like Washington, D.C., but there are so many different national park units here, a lot of which you've probably heard of, but you might not have known that they were actually national parks.
The National Mall and Memorial Parks make up more than 1,000 acres in the heart of our nation's capital. In total, there are more than 30 park units in and around Washington, D.C.
The National Mall contains more than 80 historic structures, including memorials for those who fought in the Vietnam War, the Korean War, and World War II.
Right here, we're honoring everyone that was a part of the war effort. Some of the symbolism here is you've got the wreaths. Now, the wheat symbolizes the fact that America was the breadbasket of the war. If you look over here, we've got the oak, which represents strength. It was about the industry.
And then down here, you've got rope that ties all the 50 states and the United States territories together, and that symbolizes unity.
Some monuments on the mall honor the founding fathers of our country. The memorial to Thomas Jefferson, America's third president, is designed in the classical style he liked. Jefferson was an architect, author, inventor, lawyer, and diplomat. But he's most famous for writing the Declaration of Independence, and especially this part of it.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
This monument may seem a far cry from the parks with forests and mountains that we usually visit, but there's a connection.
And the national parks come from that idea of the importance of remembering, the importance of keeping things sacred and preserving them. And honestly, when you stand in here and you look up at Thomas Jefferson, you can feel that inspiration.
When you think about what the national parks mean to us, it's freedom. It's the ability to pursue what makes us happy.
Putting the idea into practice is a long, hard struggle. Jefferson himself kept slaves as workers on his plantation, and slavery wasn't abolished until 87 years after the Declaration was written.
That's what Washington, D.C. does. It tells the story of our country, for good or for worse.
you can see across the water is the Martin Luther King Memorial. What do you say we walk over there, check that out? And I think behind it is actually Lincoln.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King Jr. was one of the most important leaders of the civil rights movement in the 1960s for the practice of nonviolent resistance he pioneered and the inspiring words he spoke, especially his I Have a Dream speech, delivered here on the National Mall in 1963.
Such an incredible depiction.
Yeah, it is. It's perfect.
The Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial opened in 2011. It's the first monument on the mall honoring a person of color. This 30-foot sculpture is 159 blocks of granite, shaped to look like one solid rock. It's called the Stone of Hope, and this whole memorial is designed to tell a story.
So you can see more of that symbolism here. It says, out of the mountain of despair, a stone of hope, and that comes from his I Have a Dream speech. So as you enter the memorial from that side, you come through the mountain of despair, and here's the stone of hope, Martin Luther King Jr. right in the center.
Dr. King is shown looking into the distance toward a better future where Jefferson's words become a full reality.
This is one of the few sculptures and statues that are not of a president in Washington, D.C. And that right there speaks volumes.
All the monuments we've seen are powerful and impressive, but somehow the Lincoln Memorial is in a class by itself.
This monument is almost a shrine. Abraham Lincoln just sits there, looks out over really what seems to be the entire scope of Washington, D.C.
What I think is so incredible about this memorial is the fact that it preserves Lincoln's legacy of really standing up for those ideas of equality for everyone.
Lincoln's leadership during the Civil War took inspiration from Jefferson's words, describing it as a struggle for the idea that all people are created equal, and turning words into action with his Emancipation Proclamation.
But now, the Lincoln Memorial has turned into almost like a temple, a sacred place for the civil rights movement, because Martin Luther King delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech from the steps of the memorial right here.
The March on Washington is a reminder that some national parks don't just honor or preserve our history, they mark a place where history was made and where history was altered.
What's crazy is Ford's Theater, where Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, isn't far from here.
Yeah.
Have you ever been down there?
I've never been down there.
I think that's something we should check out.
Tonight in Washington, D.C., we're visiting the scene of a great American tragedy. Ford's Theater, now a national monument, is where President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by an actor named John Wilkes Booth. Park Ranger Eric Martin is showing us around.
So here we have an entire view of the entire theater, exactly the way in 1865 it would have appeared. The flag-draped presidential theater box where President Lincoln was seated there. It's exactly the way it appeared on that night, April 14th, 1865.
You know, beyond the historical significance of Ford's Theater, this is just a beautiful building.
An actual working theater, thriving institution to the arts, and keeping and remembering President Lincoln's own love of the theater.
So, did Abraham Lincoln spend a lot of time at Ford's Theater?
Well, we know President Lincoln came to Ford's Theater several times. He actually saw John Wilkes Booth in a play here called The Marble Heart in 1863. So, yes.
John Wilkes Booth was one of the most popular actors in America at that time. But most people didn't know that Booth was a fanatical Confederate sympathizer.
John Wilkes Booth, though, I mean, the level of hatred and malice that he had in his heart for the Union and for President Lincoln, wouldn't that have surfaced at some point?
Well, actually, the only people who knew that John Wilkes Booth had Southern political leanings towards the Confederacy and his dislike of Lincoln politically were the immediate members of his family. Really hardly anybody else knew about it.
In Lincoln's day, presidents were not heavily guarded. It was easy for a celebrity like Booth to open the door to the president's box and step inside.
So this is it.
This is it, and right there in that rocking chair, walnut rocking chair that was owned by the Fords, that's exactly where President Lincoln was seated that night as he was anticipating the funniest line of the play, or once the line is uttered and over 1,800 people break out in laughter, that's when Booth steps through this door and from behind shoots President Lincoln.
Jeez. Wow. Everything, down to the tiniest detail, waiting for a line to get a reaction from the audience. I mean, everything was so meticulously planned.
This is where the course of American history would be forever altered and changed.
It gives you chills to see it just so close.
Booth escaped by jumping from the balcony to the stage in full view of the audience.
From the time John Wilkes Booth steps into this theater box to the time he's out the back door, probably no more than 10 seconds had elapsed. Wow. It's very, very quick.
Eventually, Booth was hunted down and killed by Union soldiers. President Lincoln was carried out of the theater to the nearest available bed, across the street at the Peterson boarding house.
In the front parlor here, Mary Todd Lincoln was basically in this area, made visits back and forth during the 9 hours President Lincoln is unconscious in that last room at the end of the hall.
Can you imagine living in this house and you know, tragedy strikes and all of a sudden you are hosting the president and all of his staff on trying to figure out what to do next? I cannot imagine that moment.
No, not at all.
For 9 hours, the president lay unconscious in this back bedroom.
Everything you see in the room is exactly what you would have seen, and the wallpaper is identical too, including all the prints.
Numerous doctors came to assess the president, and one surgeon attempted to extract the bullet.
Surgeon General Barnes attempted to extract the bullet that was lodged behind President Lincoln's right eye with a probe, a very rudimentary technique, and was unable to extract it, which may have hastened President Lincoln's death.
When Abraham Lincoln died at 7:22 the next morning, one of the men at his bedside said, "Now he belongs to the ages."
It just feels unnerving, just kind of being in this room. It gives you goosebumps, you know? And all day today, we were going to the memorials, the Lincoln Memorial, even the MLK Memorial. And then to come here, you see the other side of what a president like Abraham Lincoln stood, fought for, and ultimately died for.
We're in Washington, D.C., and today we're visiting the most prominent monument on the National Mall. We're also meeting up with a person with a great legacy of managing all the national lands, including the parks.
Hey, Sally, how are you?
Colton, so nice to see you again.
You too. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Sally Jewell was U.S. Secretary of the Interior under President Obama and a hiking buddy from our trip to Mount Rainier National Park.
So I have a recommendation for you, which is maybe just a little more adventure than what visitors to the Washington Monument get to do, and that is, how about we take the stairs?
Oh, I'm in.
Okay?
Yeah.
It's just 550 or so feet.
The Washington Monument is the world's tallest stone structure, made from blocks of marble, granite, and bluestone gneiss. It was designed in 1835 as a tribute to General George Washington, who won the Revolutionary War, the first president who set the precedent for voluntarily stepping down after 2 terms. He remains an enduring model of integrity and public service.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to do what the general public's not allowed to do, and that is we're going to take the stairs, and we're going to look at the inside guts and how this incredible stone structure was built. This is the stairwell to the Washington Monument.
Oh.
So it's kind of narrow down here because the walls have to be really thick to support all that load of rocks that are up above us.
This thing's pretty tall. Yeah, sure you
It's pretty tall, yeah. It's 555 feet, and there's also no reinforcing bar in here. And this is not actually holding them together. This mortar just keeps the water out.
This is incredible.
Yeah, so should we pick up the pace? What do you think?
I think we're gonna have to.
We got a ways to go.
The inner walls of the monument tell a story about how this amazing structure was built. Work started in 1848. 6 years later, it stopped.
The Washington Monument was only just 150 feet or so tall when it stopped for 20 years because they ran out of money.
When construction started again, the marble came from a different quarry. That's why the monument is lighter on the bottom and darker at the top. It took millions of dollars in donations from individuals, companies, and states, and the donors got their names built into the walls.
So here you got the Association of Journeymen Stonecutters of Philadelphia.
Whoa.
Donated July 9th, 1850.
Wow. That's pretty.
And it's the
work
Stonecutters of America.
I know,
You'd expect it to be good work,
That makes
right?
sense, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a shame most visitors never get to see all this, but so many people were breaking off bits of the stone as souvenirs, the Park Service had to close the stairs to the general public in 1976.
This is cool on so many different fronts, but this is a national park. You need all these different people chipping in to preserve it, to keep it going.
exactly right.
And it's just a great example. It's written on the wall, you know?
The higher we get, the more of the monument's story we see. There are 193 memorial stones on the east and west interior walls of the monument. Many of them are considered valuable works of art. They start at the 30-foot level and go as high as the 450-foot level.
You see these are kind of rough cut stones and different shapes and sizes. And we're about to cross the time from when the monument stopped construction because they ran out of money. And then you see this kind of engineered stone above, and this is when the Army Corps of Engineers took over.
Construction first stopped in 1854, then picked up again in 1878 when there was a new technology for building with stone.
Yeah, because down there,
Right?
it looked like the rocks were kind of more jagged
Yeah.
and rough, and up here they look really nice and smooth.
Exactly. So part of that's just the evolution of machinery.
Yeah.
So we got to keep going. We're not even a third of the way yet.
The monument suffered a near disaster in 2011 when a Virginia earthquake shook stones loose from the exterior and opened cracks throughout the structure. It's lucky the whole pile of stones didn't come crashing down, and it took almost 3 years and almost 3 miles worth of sealant to fill the cracks and repair the stones.
So they had actually a beautiful scaffolding all the way up the outside of the monument. Said to the director of the National Park Service, "Think we could climb up that?" So I had an opportunity with the construction crew to climb up the outside of the scaffolding and to look down on the top of the Washington Monument.
The repairs included an upgrade to the elevator, which first opened back in 1926.
So the elevator was originally only for men.
Really?
They wouldn't allow women and children on the elevator. They all had to take the stairs because they were afraid the elevator was just too dangerous for women and children.
Because I was going to say, I would think it'd be the other way.
Yeah, I know. Well, steam-powered elevator, and I think they were a little worried it might fail. So here we are approaching the last pitch to the very top. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. After about 40 minutes of climbing 500 feet of stairs, we've almost reached the top floor of the Washington Monument. Just above us, we can see the floor of the Visitor Center.
Here we go, almost to the summit.
All right.
Except there's one more level to go.
This is where the elevator admits visitors to a small museum about the history of the monument. A few more stairs get us to the top floor, right below the point of the monument.
So this is the observation level. Here we are.
When it opened in 1878, this was the tallest building in the world. It's still the tallest in Washington, D.C., and no place else offers city views like this.
This is absolutely incredible. It takes until you really get up to the top to see how tall the Washington Monument is, and D.C. as a whole.
And one of the neat things about this city is the buildings have to be shorter than the Capitol. So you actually get a sense of spaciousness
Yeah.
that is unusual in a large city.
In spite of all its grand monuments and imposing buildings, Sally says the true purpose of the National Mall is to be America's shared front yard.
But this is a place where, people really enjoy themselves. These are public lands. They're owned by all people. And this was how the national parks were set up 100 years ago. They were set up not as a playground for the rich and famous, but as a place that was here for all Americans. And that is it really was America's best idea.
Yeah.
And still is.
Coming to Washington is a good reminder that our national parks are not just about preserving America's incredible natural beauty. They also tell the story of who we are, how we got where we are, the vision of liberty and justice for all, and the sacrifices people have made to make it a reality.
It's a lesson we'll be taking with us as we leave the city behind and set out for our next outdoor adventure. And if we can do it, so can you. So the next chance you get, go out and rock the park.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Make sure to leave any questions or comments that you have.
And please subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more to come.